she has her plan made up, so
Ask some
go ahead.
questions. My name is Jennifer Merkle. I'm a trustee here at the Interlaken Historical Society. I moved to Interlaken about 10 years ago, and I wasn't alive in the 1960s, so that, I guess, made me the best person to ask the questions. So, I am going to, hopefully have some prompts or some questions, and this seems like the kind of crowd that if I'm asking the wrong questions, you'll let me know, so please do, if that comes up. But really wanted to get people together in a relaxed setting to hear from folks who lived here in Interlaken in the 1960s. We're recording this for our society, and we'll put it on our YouTube channel, so hopefully for years to come, people will be able to look back and hear from residents who were here and learn about what it was like to live in Interlaken in the 1960s, which, if you do the math, was about 60 years ago. So, yes, welcome to 2025. And we also are live streaming on YouTube. We're live streaming on Facebook. So hopefully we might get some people chiming in from way out across the country. So, the 1960s was a decade of change, nationally and I'm sure right here at home. Across the country, people experienced the shock of President Kennedy's assassination, people of the Vietnam War, hope of the civil rights movement, and the thrill of watching the first person walk on the moon. Meanwhile, life here in Interlaken likely carried on with its own rhythms, small town traditions, farming life, new technologies, and new music. So tonight, people are invited to share their personal stories about their experiences here in the 1960s. And to get us started, I've had two people who are not going to be here tonight reach out with stories to share, kind of our bookending the decade. The first story is from John Daly. He says, Jennifer, your newsletter asks people to share 1960s memories. I have a story from March 12, 1959. The Daly family lived on Hall's Corner Road near Covert, and my father died alone when the house caught fire for some unknown reason. It burned to the ground. My father was a farmer who loved the Interlaken area because it reminded him of the green fields of Ireland where he grew up. After a funeral mass, both in Interlaken and in the Bronx, we buried him at St. Raymond's in the Bronx. It was a very sad day for my mother, Catherine, and my two brothers, Michael and Dan, and my two sisters, Maureen and Monica. We were homeless with no house to go back to. Fortunately, my sister Maureen lived in a small, one-bedroom apartment in Queens, and all of us went there to live, packed in as close as you can get. My mother never went back to visit, but she put the land in a bank and eventually sold it to a local farmer. And he also sent the article from the Interlaken Review, and it said, flames were spotted by the Horella family at about 2:45 a.m. 3 hours later, firemen probed the ruins and found his body in the living room area. When the firemen arrived on the scene, the house was engulfed in flames and there was very little they could do. Nothing was salvaged, and the firemen remained on duty until 10 a.m., cause of the fire undetermined. At the time of the tragedy, a heavy snow was falling, and by the time the firemen returned to the station, better than 8 inches was reported in South Seneca County. So, and then from later in the decade, we heard from Mark Andrews, and he shared, I moved to Interlaken in 1967 at the age of 7, and we moved into Knight Street, last house next to the carnival grounds. It was the Thompson house next door to the McPhersons. It was a great living. Next door to the carnival grounds for 3 days, your yard was lit up and it was a party, not to mention the parade coming right down the street past your house. The street was filled with kids when we moved in. There was the Holmans, later the Whittiers, the Dickersons, later the Jameses, Novaks, later the Reynolds, The other side, the Hacketts, then the Wilsons, the Tulas, and good old Mrs. Bassett and Lars. That street was our playground for many years. There was a street light in the middle of the street in front of the Tulas' house, and many a summer night we would play hide and seek, kick the can, or frying pan. The carnival grounds was also our playground for battle ball, baseball, kickball. It was a great place to grow up. Many afternoons we could be found over at the Wilsons' basketball court playing around the world. We would set up ramps in the street and we would jump our bikes, skinning our knees and elbows many times in the Sunday afternoon. After we played kickball or baseball, we'd get our dimes and we'd walk down to Egan's gas station and get a soda. So, certainly sorrow and joy, and sort of spanning the whole decade. So, my first question for the group to get us started is, how do you remember people in the community coming together, whether it be for events, celebrations, or hardships?
Carnival. Fireman's Carnival. And I wasn't here at that time, but anyway, shortly thereafter. But that was a big deal, the Fireman's Carnival.
Most of my memories are early childhood memories that sound sort of silly now. Looking back on it, I was born in 1945 and actually lived in the house that's, I think, 3 houses down. It's yellow now, a 2-story house. And at that time it was owned by Art and Teresa Egan. And we rented the upstairs apartment. And until I was 6 years old, I was in that house. And then we moved, big long move, to Clinton Street, which is just down around the block. And I was on Clinton Street until 1968, when I moved another great big move to Romulus. But my childhood memories were like Halloween, Christmas of course, Memorial Day, the parades, and the carnival was also a really big thing in my time. But just walking to and from school, I have so many memories, really weird, that I might share later on. Most of mine are really childhood memories, even though I got to be, an adult when I left.
What were some of the local hangouts or businesses that people remember?
Crocs.
Crocs.
Yeah. Milk plant, soda bar,
Yeah.
turned into a restaurant for a few years.
My mother worked there in the office with Janet James.
Oh, yeah.
Crocs. My dad worked at the school, custodian. So my parents were in this area all their adult life.
Where did you live on Clinton Street?
Well, the house on the corner was Townsend's, and then there was Townsend's barn, and then there was our house. It was on the right side going down.
Brewer was on the corner.
Yeah.
In the barn, and then their.
Oh, and then,
Yeah.
okay, and we lived directly across. Now.
Well,
We
you
lived
do.
in the second house from the corner.
Well, I also, when I graduated and got married and lived across the street from my parents in Jenny Hunt's apartment upstairs, and then we rented the house that was right next to my mother and father's. Louis Cuneo owned that. Everybody remembers Louis Cuneo. And then I started work at Sampson and moved to Romulus.
So, what other jobs were common in the town? What did people's family do for a living, or do you remember in town?
There really weren't many jobs in the town. And it was getting smaller and smaller, shrinking, businesses left. And it was really sad to see it.
Oh, shoot. Blacksmith.
But you had a restaurant for a while. Had multiple, yeah, that's true.
At one time, they had stores and Wicks's, well, we called them both drugstores, but only one was a pharmacy, Wicks's. But there was Hanford's Hardware. I don't want to do all the talking.
I know.
I can tell you every single store, because this is where walking to and from school. Yeah,
When it was safe.
yeah, it was very safe, it was very safe. But there were 3 or 4, maybe 5 gas
And there was
stations
a
at one
dry
time.
goods store too.
Whittier's, Bill J had the shoe store.
Braden's had it back before
Yes.
that.
Yeah,
Braden's,
yeah.
yeah.
And there was a car dealership.
Yes.
Some stores. And some people were busy just having kids.
Yeah.
And owning a car business too, yeah.
2 hotels,
Yeah.
Yeah.
the Goodman Hotel, the Lakecrest Hotel.
Run right next door to the car dealership.
Yeah.
The bank was on the other
Yeah.
side.
Yeah.
Dr. Gould.
It was-
Gould's up over the bank.
It was very active at one time, but then it went by the wayside.
Yeah, Doc Gould was still here then.
Folds, Dr.
Oh,
Folds,
no,
yeah.
yes, he was
We had
busy.
a dentist at one time,
Where was the dentist?
up over the bank.
Yeah.
Or, I can't remember the bank, he had an office.
Who was it?
Hartman.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that name.
How did people get around in the 1960s? Did everybody have a car or,
They tried.
yeah?
They could do a deal.
Yeah, I would say most of the people did. However, there was a Greyhound bus coming through, and it would
Yes.
stop at Wicks's drugstore and pick
Yeah.
people
And take them,
to Ithaca.
Ithaca one way
Or Geneva the other way.
yeah, okay.
Was there still a train?
Yeah.
at that
Oh,
time?
yeah.
That's what
It wasn't really a passenger train.
No, it wasn't
for,
passenger then.
Daly Brothers, the
Yeah.
feed and grain, they'd stop there and load it up,
Yeah.
whatever, and went
But I
somewhere.
don't know about the 60s. I think it stopped the end of the 50s, didn't it?
was it?
Probably for the
train,
most part.
You probably remember.
Yeah, oh, I remember.
60s.
I think in the late 50s, the train stopped, didn't it?
Tracks were tore out in 66, weren't they, John?
I think
In there
so.
somewhere, yeah.
Or 57 or 8.
Yeah, probably. The canning factory, we forgot about the canning factory. Yeah,
That closed in 53.
gosh. I remember it like it was yesterday.
My husband said when they would bring the green beans in and they would fall off the trucks, the kids would run behind and pick up the green beans.
We
and-
didn't even wait long to stop. We would run. In those days, when they picked, it was peas for us.
Yeah,
They
these
picked,
were
they
built.
just pulled the whole vine and everything up and threw it on these trailers. And as kids, well, I'm ashamed of myself now because these people worked so hard to pick this stuff and we just waited around the corner and we'd run out and grab a whole bunch of these peas and sit there.
You're the one
all
that did
afternoon.
that. We were the ones that did
You're
that.
the one that did that.
Many times. Did you do it too?
Oh, yeah.
And he's a lot older than you
Sandy
are.
lived out of town, she probably
I
didn't get
don't
in on the
remember that,
theft.
because I was, no, I was out of town, my
Yeah.
grandma covered was there,
Juvenile
Uncle Bud, and Bert,
Yes,
and Upland. So I had
yes.
3 relatives there.
Yeah.
We used to skate on Louigan's Pond.
Oh, gosh,
And Lou would
yes.
trust us kids. He had a barn and he had a couple outside lights. And he would never lock the sliding door. He had a radio in there and everything in there and benches. We skated till 9 or 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
Never worried about us going on the upper end where the water flew in. And the guys would play hockey. So we had to fight with them girls to ice skate. Us alone playing hockey.
Yeah.
No, it was real trustworthy back then. You didn't lock your doors, nothing.
I don't think we ever locked our house.
No?
And
Our
I'm not
car?
sure it had a key to it. I mean, it was a very old house. I don't ever remember locking the door.
You do
And
not.
we wouldn't skate on Louis's Pond,
we
and my
did.
grandfather Hubbard said it was safe, and Lou said it was safe.
Yeah,
You can't find it.
Where was the pond?
right on the corner of,
Cuba Street.
yeah, Cayuga and Prospect.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was Louigan's house, the yellow house, and then the barn, and then the pond is behind them. It's still there, yeah, but it's all grown up. Yeah, but he left shovels, we'd shovel. We never played the music loud, so we were there to tell function a lot.
Right.
So what else can you tell me about the social scene or dating in Interlaken in the 1960s? Any interesting stories there?
Yeah.
For our,
Yeah, I got one. Harold and I met at college, Alfred, and I was visiting, I came down for the weekend, and one of the local watering holes was KT's in Willard, which is now Riley's family diner. And his father had a, quote, farm truck, which had an agricultural license or some such thing. And we were going to go use the truck to go over there. And Harold says, now I want to tell you this in advance. There's a problem with the gas line. So if the truck stops, I'm not doing anything to make the truck stop. But I have to get out with a bicycle pump and get the line open and pump into the gasoline line to free up the debris. And I'm like, okay. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. And I don't remember where we were when that happened.
I think you just wanted to go parking.
Well, I think he was trying to be a gentleman, Doug, and saying that, I'm not making this up, there really is a problem. But anyhow, there really was a problem. And he got out with a bicycle pump and pumped the line, and eventually we got back to the farm. But yeah, that was a dating experience, yeah.
KT's and Willard.
KT's and
And you're still with him.
Yes, yes, I guess it was a good idea, Sandy, yeah.
At least he wants you. Come on, somebody else must have a dating story.
Oh dear.
Well, Mrs. Pritchard.
I'll take care of that. The stories that I have go farther back than that, but it still comes up to the present time.
Yeah, let's hear it. I love it.
Okay, so I'll just start this, and if you stop me if you have a question or whatever. But a guy by the name of James G. Pritchard Sr., my great-grandfather, arrived from England with only carriage tools in his pockets in 1870, with his wife and 2 children at the port of Quebec. I spent a short time in Denver, Colorado, then returning to Ithaca in Varna, opening a carriage shop on Center Street with a sales shop on West Green Street. Later, this address included automobiles. Dodge Brothers Cars and Trucks were born in 1914, and grandfather waited until 1915 to secure the franchise. The building at 304 South Cavers Street was built in 1921 and has served Ithaca and the surrounding communities since that time. In 1919, my dad, Jim and Edith Wilkinson, were married in Ithaca. Jim and Edith decided to move to Interlaken to start a satellite Dodge business connected to the franchise in Ithaca. That was flourishing at the time. I was told an interesting story later in life. My grandfather told my dad that he was making a big mistake and would be moving back to Ithaca within a year. This didn't happen. Interlaken Sales Company survived with approximately 1977. New and used vehicles were driven to Interlaken to be sold to local citizens. That's where I got my start. Get this down here. Howard Potts and Al Wright were the techs at the garage, and Jim White was the handyman on the main floor. Ellen Patrick was the bookkeeper for nearly 50 years. Dad and Mom first lived above Redmond's IGA store, then to Main Street where Professor Norton lived, then to Orchard Street west of the Catholic Church. In 1954, Bill and Caroline were married in Bombay, New York. If you don't know where that is, it's up near Messina. In Malone, way up north. I met her when I went to St. Lawrence, so that's how that happened. But when I told my dad I was marrying a Catholic girl, he became very disturbed. Although my parents had many Catholic friends, and we lived right next to the Catholic Church, he said it was not right for a Protestant in those days to marry a Catholic. I then told my dad that I was going ahead anyway. My dad looked at me and said, "Okay, Bill, I'll help you pick out the ring at Charlie Wiggins's jewelry store in Interlaken." We were blessed with 4 children, Robert, Thomas, Daniel, and Patty, and have been together for 70 years. Don Mabey and Bob Wheeler were managers at one time at the garage here in Interlaken, and my dad usually stayed at the Interlaken store a couple of days a week. I enjoyed working at the store too, until my dad passed away in 1961. Grandpa followed a month later, and that's when I committed daily to Ithaca to take over the business down there. Okay, let's see, and that's about it. It lasted until 1977, but it was interesting.
Sure.
A lot of fun. Yeah.
So there was a lot going on in the 60s.
Yeah.
Nancy Staples
And-
down in Florida made the comment, in the theater, the last rows on the left were for those who were couples. Because we had the theater going in that time period.
It was Charlie Wicks and me.
Well, you weren't in the last row on the left.
Charlie and I used to
That
sit
was
together and on Friday or Saturday night. We had a great time.
I forgot about
Double
those great stories.
header at a Western and very interesting.
And speaking of things to do, another thing I just thought of, I think churches did more things, had more parties, more socials, and being 2 churches, it was great, because you got to know everybody that way.
The Catholic Church had their barbecue, but that started right on the church grounds.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
on,
And
Orchard
then-
Street.
Yeah.
The very first year, I don't know who, I was quite young at that time, very horse crazy.
It might have been Willer's. I'm not sure whether, I think it was Willer's.
What?
That started the cooking of the chickens.
Could be. I
Oh,
don't
maybe,
remember. I don't
yeah.
remember.
That would be Rick's father.
Yeah. But the first year they raffled off, or they were going to raffle off a pony. That was gonna be, I was sure I was gonna win this pony. Well, my dad worked at the church, he was a member of the church. And somehow they got the pony the night before the barbecue. And my dad brought it to our place on Clinton Street, good grassy area out back, with this pony to spend the night there. Well, that was wonderful. But I tried to go up and pet the pony, it bit me, it kicked at me. It was just a stinking little Shetland pony. Somebody got rid of this mean pony to raffle it at the church. And who won it was Jim Bassett, who was an older man without children. And I was heartbroken that he came and got this pony. I don't know whatever happened to him.
And he lived in the village.
He did?
Yeah.
Back of,
On the
corner. Wilkins?
Huh?
Yeah, he lived behind Lou Egan's gas station, corner of
Yep.
Seneca and Mechanic.
Okay, I remember that, but I don't know what happened to the pony. It didn't live in back of Louigan's place, I don't think. But anyway, I didn't get it.
There's a comment in the back.
I remember the Clover Farm store,
Yes.
the Grange man upstairs, the Odd Pals Hall. Well, the Clover Farm store, I think John maybe, or Jim and Key, I can't remember which one owned it at the time. Well, they took they were gonna take the stairway out. That's how, like the Grange moved to Covert. And I remember I had just joined, and this was in '68, '69. And we took the piano, Clarence Ward, Lou Morgan, and Carl Schaffhauer, Salpenecker. They were all older men, and they had it all figured out how to get that piano down those stairs. With a rope and a pulley and everything. And we got that piano down those stairs and into a pickup truck and moved it to Covert. But they were worried about hurting the steps, but he was going to take the stairs out anyway. That's why we couldn't meet there anymore, because they were going to take the stairs out to make the building bigger for the grocery store.
Oh.
Huh.
But I remember then the way they had it all rigged up, and they had it all planned out, how we were going to get that piano down those
Yeah.
planes.
So, this was the question that is probably defining of the 1960s was, where were you when you heard about the assassination of John F. Kennedy? Does anybody have?
Yeah.
Can everybody probably?
We were watching we were listening to a football game on the radio, and all of a sudden, my dad and I were sitting there, and all of a sudden it came out right then. We couldn't believe it, we just did not believe it.
I was in the Navy.
That was good, John.
What?
I was in the Navy when we heard about it in boot camp.
I was in the Navy soon after. I'll tell you.
Oh, honey, that was
You got
not
the day
John
off.
F. Kennedy.
Who was it?
I don't remember which one.
I was in Mr. Peabody's English class and they announced it and I was shocked. And it was about ready to get over anyway to go home, so I don't know, turned it right on TV. That was devastating.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah.
I was in first grade, I remember, and I went to Romulus to school, so I was in first grade, and Mrs. Corcoran was my teacher, she was from Ovid. And I remember Mr. Alessio, our principal, came in and whispered something to her, and she just broke down in tears, and of course, all of us little first graders were wondering what was going on. And the next thing we knew, there was an announcement over the loudspeaker, and it said that everybody was to get their coats on, and that we were all going home. And I think somebody must have told us what was going on at some point, or else my mother did when we got home, but I still remember that teacher, she just melted.
I remember Walter Cronkite said the president died. It was about 1 o'clock after it happened.
And he took his glasses off
Yes.
and he just shook his head. They use that picture often when they describe that.
Most kids nowadays wouldn't know who Walter Cronkite
Well,
was.
they're not teaching them history. Taking a lot of the old history out, they need to know.
I think it was an interesting time. I was in high school. I grew up downstate, closer to New York City. And I don't know when we became aware as young people about politics and elected officials. We all had the courses in school, but it was a subject. It didn't seem to relate to us. And there was something about President Kennedy that had great, regardless of how he's remembered as a president or where we all stand with our political views, but he had a way that really got a lot of young people in my particular age group, I think, thinking about what it was to be president, what it was to be an elected official. And then there was the Peace Corps. And that was a big deal, and that was something when I was in college I considered very seriously. And then Harold came or
Just sort of a general feeling about nuclear war.
yeah, I don't need her desk, that would have been her desk. Let's see.
I know, exactly.
Also useful.
Yeah, they always made us go out in the hall.
Yeah, start and cover.
Get down on your knees and put your hands over your head, and I always thought, even as a little kid, what the heck is that gonna do?
Ceiling falling out.
Yeah, Cindy.
You used to get all your shots at the school. The nurse would, Dr. Ellen would come over, and the nurse had one door you went in and went around and come back out. And I guess my parents had to sign papers, but we got all our shots at school. Set a day and they'd call you out, and you go down and get your shot.
I think when I was a kid, we used to go down here on Main Street. Ian Bassett would give us our shots.
Or no,
Yeah.
Virginia Ballroom.
Oh, yeah, Cousin Virginia.
Yeah.
I just remember some kids used to get whatever, I don't know what they gave it, there was a sugar cube.
That was for
Oh,
polio.
They had red stuff on it, but I never got the sugar cube, I always had to get the shot.
We don't get a sugar.
Yeah, we got the sugar cube.
But our parents must have had a sign for that. I never knew.
I think our school system was quite progressive, maybe for that time. We had, we had the nurse, Mrs. Trozier, forever, Cynthia Trozier. There was a dental hygienist. We had an office right there in the elementary school. And they added on to the school. First there was just the main part of the school, and then the elementary school was built, I'm not sure just when. That must have started maybe in the 60s.
And as I remember, didn't they once a year have physicals? The doctor came to
Yeah.
school
Yeah.
and you had
Dr.
physicals?
Yeah.
Oh.
Cynthia Trozier told me later that I had chicken pox. She said it was the worst I've ever seen in my life, ever. I think she was right.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
She always used to tell us, I'm going to put this lipstick on you. She called it lipstick, and it must have been like mercurochrome or iodine or something, but it was had reddish color, and she always, that would be what she was going to do. But it's not going to hurt, it's just a little lipstick. Horse of a different color.
I remember having two things at the same time. It must have been chicken pox and measles. I don't know what it was. But one of them must have been measles because my mother put me in a room downstairs. She shut the curtains. It was dark.
Yeah.
She wouldn't let me have a light on.
Yeah.
And all I remember eating was cracker soup, and I thought for sure my mother was trying to kill me.
What about any like weather events, storms, natural disasters, any memories?
Snow.
The blizzard of '66, I remember. We were snowed in at Sheldrick for 3 days. It was wonderful. No school.
And you had storms back then. If they closed the school, you couldn't go up by Peabody's. My dad worked for the village or the town in the winter, and he would plow, and he'd come just long enough to take the plow out front of the house because he was working 24 hours. He'd come in and take a shower real quick. Mother would make lunch and supper and coffee, and he'd go back out to work.
There was something about Peabody's place up there. The
It
snow would get so high that we would walk up there, the kids would walk up there and dig into the tunnels or whatever, into these great big snow drifts. That was like the deepest part of the whole town, was way
Down
on
at
West
Lutz
Avenue.
too.
They had a Conklin
Down at
ordinance to
That
drill
drifted
through
in
that
there.
so that you could
Yeah.
walk right over the top of the
Yeah.
tunnel right through there. But we didn't have the equipment to do it, so they had a outfit come in from the ordinance and drill a hole right through it so you could walk right over the top of it.
Yeah, big
It
loader.
was unbelievable.
You probably were just going up to see John Peabody.
Who?
No, John was younger. I was just talking about John Peabody the other day. His dad was Bill, excuse me, Bill. He was a teacher
Yeah.
at the school, and there was Bill Jr. and John, and then a younger girl, Regina. And Bill was very, very smart. I mean, he was an excellent student. John, the next son, was always in trouble. He was always saying the wrong thing at the wrong time in school and things like that. And he was a nice kid, but he was a little devil. Yeah.
I didn't grow up in Interlaken, but I spent a lot of time here. Got to know everybody. I grew up in Jacksonville, went to Strumersburg School, but we had a Boy Scout troop in Jacksonville. And we had a camporee every spring at Chestnut Hollow over on the other side of Ithaca. So the Interlaken troop was there, and everybody had pup tents. And a couple of guys from Interlaken, John Peabody was one of them. That night they went out and cut every tent rope. So we woke up in the morning, the tent's laying on you. The whole place was flat except the troop from Interlaken, their tents were all.
That's John Peabody.
It didn't take long to figure out what happened.
How about television? What are you guys watching on television?
Black and white, yeah.
Yeah. Bonanza was the first show I ever saw in color. And it was at Hickok's house down on, whatever that road is, down toward the boulevard. Cliff Hickok, he used to be at the town, he was like supervisor of the town barns.
Yeah.
And something happened, they had some kind of an emergency and he had a heart attack while on duty and died.
Yeah,
Cliff
they
Hickok.
called him and said the barn was burning.
Oh, that's right. the barn.
And so he left the town barns and went down, and his barn was aflame, and they lost it, and he had a massive heart attack and
Yeah.
died.
Well, Sonny, his son, I went down there to visit him, and they had a color TV, and Bonanza was the first show I ever saw. Color.
Mine was The Wonderful World of Disney was the first one I ever saw in color. And it was magical. My dad had sold a car to a guy that lived down on High Banks on East Lake Road, and we delivered the car, and then they invited us, apparently they knew us, I don't know, invited us in to watch TV, and they had a color TV, and we watched The Wonderful World of Disney, and we were just, my brother and I were mesmerized, you know, it's like, wow. We just had a little black and white TV, and I think it got one channel. I think it got channel 5 out of Syracuse, and that was it.
And those were the days when you had to get up and turn it on.
Yeah, right. Well, times have changed. Yeah. I think it was better back in those days, actually, in many ways.
I think some of the shows were better.
Yeah. Much better.
Kids nowadays wouldn't know what rabbit ears were.
The library was real busy, because I worked the library. And then Cape Coke Fair did nights, Thursday night, and whenever Wilmot did Tuesday night, we were open 2 nights a week. And they both lived in town, and through the winter, they didn't want to get out. So I did my Tuesday afternoons, and then I did Thursday and Tuesday nights for them. And then when the spring come, they were glad to go back to, but everybody would come in, so you knew everybody knew. That's where they'd come in. And I had a gentleman, Mr. Lynch from Trumansburg, come in one afternoon, and he'd take a series of the mystery books, a whole series right here. And when he come in, he said, do you take foreigners? And I go, foreigners? He goes, yeah, I'm from Trumansburg. So you take 10 of them and bring them back every week and take the next row, you know? He was a nice gentleman.
I've heard it argued, and I wouldn't say people are wrong, that the 60s had the best music ever. What were people's musical tastes? Well, who were you listening to or in the 60s?
Beatles.
Elvis Presley.
Any, you guys go to any concerts or live?
Yes, indeed. Woodstock? Ring a bell with anyone?
Yeah.
It's built, but I wouldn't get there.
Yeah, well, Harold and I were married in the middle, not at Woodstock, but while it was going on.
We had our date picked before that.
Yeah, we had our date first, but, and we had a lot of concert-goer people approach us as we left the church, and Harold's brothers, they were a formidable bunch, lined up to protect us, and I thought there's going to be a brawl on the church lawn because we're going to have a confrontation. But it was just, you know, peace and love and all that good stuff. But the week earlier, one of my bridesmaids lived about 2 miles from the Yasker farm. And my bridal party and I stood in the middle of Yasker's farm watching the platform being built for the performance with the cows, with the manure, and we collectively said, well, this is the biggest joke going, this is going to be nothing, and of course the rest is history. But one of the same gal that lived there, she and her husband had to go through Pennsylvania to get to the church because Route 17 was closed and you couldn't get through. And then about 20, 30 years later, I found out that many of my college friends that attended our wedding went to Woodstock. And somehow I never knew that. But anyway, we had some mutual friends. George and Linda Pirro lived just up the street here a little ways, and I knew George from college. His dad and my dad worked together, and he wound up taking our college friends to Woodstock. But yeah, it was very interesting. But anyway,
Yeah,
claim to fame.
that's my story. So 1969 was the moon landing. What are memories of that? Is that something that was really exciting?
There. I had an 11-year-old that kept all the pictures that came in out of the newspapers.
Oh.
Yeah.
I remember it took forever. I was at summer camp at Castle Wasco, over on Owasco Lake, and they let us, they had, a TV, and pretty much everybody left because it was just taking forever. You're just sitting there watching this fuzzy kind of picture. But I think I remember seeing it, but I may have fallen asleep while it was.
Another thing associated with the 1960s are all the civil rights movements and protests. Was that something that happened in Interlaken or South Seneca County? Or did that sort of thing come to this area?
What year did Cornell have their takeover?
Yeah.
Yeah.
69.
68 or 69,
Yeah, it was right. I had just started at Cornell when that happened. And we, as employees, I was up at the far end of the greenhouses, and we were taking turns protecting the greenhouse. I don't know what we would have done. I certainly don't know what I would have done. But we were, and obviously the protesters were really not interested in agriculture, and they were making a statement. It got really straight. But, yeah, I think my parents probably wondered what their daughter had gotten herself into. I didn't think I was that a lot of the issues. But,
I didn't see any of the protests here, but my very brave Girl Scout leader took us to Washington DC, and it was when the biggest biggest Vietnam, but it was the biggest protest. And we were supposed to go to places like the Smithsonian and the Washington Monument. We didn't get to go to see any of those. But I remember being on the bus and looking down the streets, and all you could see were people. Just thousands and thousands of people. We went to Arlington Cemetery and to Mount Vernon instead. They got us out of Washington, D.C.
What year was that?
I am not sure, but
And who was your leader?
my Aunt Frances, and we had, you know, just done all sorts of fundraising to do this, and
Yeah.
so she was, and I was like, boy, she was brave to take us all down there, and I still remember the one thing. I mean, we were just little country bumpkins, and we had to get from the hotel, which was a fairly nice hotel, to the bus station, and we had to walk through a really nasty part of Washington, D.C. So here she is with all these little Girl Scouts in their Girl Scout uniforms, all carrying our suitcases, and we're walking through, you know, and it was at night, so we were walking through this really nasty part of Washington, D.C. to get to the bus station. So I was like, I still remember that, and just how, you know, wow, I would never have done that.
What questions did I not ask that I should have? Anybody?
How many people here are still living in Interlaken? I mean, I know you folks.
Yeah.
Quite a few.
Gary, Earl,
Cool spot.
Trumansburg?
Yeah. Well, I'm outside of Oakwood. I never got very far from Interlaken.
I really got too far.
My heart is still there in many ways.
So I grew up in Fayette, and we really didn't even know where Ovid was
Oh my God.
until my aunt and uncle became the rangers at the Boy Scout camp at Camp Babcock Covey. And I remember we took my grandma and we drove to Ovid to try to find out where this was that Aunt Janet was moving to. You know, and here it's, you know, and then I find out other things, like that my dad used to set pins at the Ovid bowling alley when they set them manually. And my uncles used to race cars at the, you know, at the South Seneca Speedway, but like we never came to Ovid for anything until a relative moved
I
here.
didn't know where Fayette was either.
Some people still don't. I was talking to a girl I grew up with, and I graduated from high school with in Romulus, and I was saying something about the Fayette Historical Society, and that the building is located in beautiful downtown Fayette. And she's like, I didn't even know that Fayette had a downtown.
It's still there too.
Like, where is it? And I'm like, we get on 414 and you can't miss it, you know.
You know, you were asking about employment, and we all forgot about Willard Psych Center, the Army Depot. I mean, the depot is what brought Interlaken to life, I guess. So many people came to this area, and so many people worked there, and
and they protested too, the women, remember that?
oh yes, Women's Peace Encampment.
That was like in the 80s.
That was
though.
kind of scary.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
That was the 80s.
And the worst part of it was, a lot of the things they said were true.
Yeah.
We didn't, I lived across the street from the depot entrance, and I
Didn't realize.
never thought of, you know, anything being in there that might be contaminating the water system or anything like that.
And when Vietnam happened, Jane Fonda, the veterans hated her because she got a lot of the guys killed because she was protesting America being there, and she was all Vietnam, telling lies and lies. So when they elected her, whatever they did at the women's thing in Waterloo, the veterans on their motorcycles protested for days and days not to pick her name.
Yeah, no,
Huh?
They called her Hanoi Jane.
Yes.
But you know, Washington DC was not always bad, because when we were down there, Bill was stationed in the Navy for 2 years. Our apartment was so hot at night, it was suffocating you. Couldn't stand it. So you grabbed a blanket and your pillows, maybe a little change, and a radio with batteries. And you went down on the Potomac River. Down there was a big park, and bumper to bumper you parked. Every nationality you'd want to see, everybody out there sleeping on their blankets. No problems, no fights, never, anything.
Yeah.
And that was 54, 55. But
Times have changed, haven't they?
Yeah.
I can do it now.
I remember when this building was built, and they put in a cellar, and the rain started in, and we lived right across the road, and my dad walked me across the street to see the new building being built, and I looked over, and it looked like a swimming pool to me. I don't know how long it ever took them to get that water out of there and finish the rest of the building, but that made a big impression on me.
Well, thank you, everybody, so much. This was really fun.
It was fun.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
We have a few people have brought in some things to share, so in a minute I'll invite you to take a look around. And of course, we've got treats, some good cookies to enjoy. But again, certainly thank you so much. Stories are amazing, and the memories that you guys shared was really full. It's living history of what our community was like. And you can also tell your friends and family to tune in on YouTube later if they want to rewatch and hear some more.
Somehow I got confused, I don't know how. I thought it was last Friday, and my husband and I came over, and I didn't know that it was going to be here, I thought it was going to be downtown. And then we looked around, and finally, I think his name is Jerry Messmer. He and his wife had just picked up a pizza, and I thought, well, they must be coming to this, because I knew them, and they lived in Interlaken forever, and I said, are you gonna go to the, share your memories of the 60s? They knew nothing about it, and I said, well, it's tonight. Well, we came barreling up here, and nobody was here.
Well, you made it tonight. So.
Yes, and I'm so
Yes.
glad we came back.
Yes, me too. So as we're going forward, our society, our museums will be open in July and August, so please stop by, grab a slice of pizza, and check out the museums on a Saturday afternoon in the summer. That'd be great. We have a summer social in July, and coming in September, barn dance over at the farm, and we will have another program in October about waterways, inland waterways. So,
Very nice.
hopefully, I hope we'll see you all again. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.